In the precise instant, the father of the graduating senior stepped through the doors of the university auditorium in Austin, Texas, holding the hand of another woman. Every conversation died as if a switch had been thrown. More than 300 faces turned as one toward the main entrance. Henry Albright appeared in a navy suit that still fit him, as if tailored that morning. His posture straight, his smile small and certain. The kind of smile a man wears when he believes the room still belongs to him. At his side walked Brianna Hayes, younger, striking, her light blue dress catching the overhead lights. In the front row, Matthew Albright, still wearing his black gown, felt the blood leave his face in a single cold wave. Beside him, his mother Isabella sat without moving, without tears, without any visible reaction at all. She simply watched the pair advance, as though she had rehearsed this exact entrance 100 times in the quiet of her own mind. Next to her rested a white-haired man with crossed arms and an unreadable expression, the stillness of someone who had waited years for a single, carefully chosen minute. Henry glanced once in that direction, failed to place the stranger, and kept walking. He believed no one present would dare confront him on his son's most important day. He was wrong. The university director returned to the microphone and spoke with deliberate calm. "Mr. Albright, before we proceed to the presentation of diplomas, there is someone who needs to address you in front of everyone here." The smile vanished from Henry's face. He had not walked into a celebration. He had walked into the place where someone had been waiting for him all along. To understand how the auditorium reached that frozen silence, the story must travel back 18 years. 18 years earlier, Henry Albright was only an ambitious young man, with an idea and almost nothing else. He wanted to build a distribution company for construction materials in the growing city of Austin. Capital and connections were scarce. Isabella Mitchell was different. She was the only daughter of Oliver Mitchell, a quiet investor who disliked attention, and who had for years been one of the silent benefactors of the very university, where everything would later come to light. Henry never admitted, even to himself, that he had known exactly who her father was from the beginning. They married 2 years after they met in a simple ceremony under a clear Texas sky. Oliver watched from a distance, offered no speeches, only a firm handshake, and one sentence Henry never forgot: "Take care of her well, or one day you will discover I was always nearby." Henry laughed at the time, thinking it the nervousness of a protective father. It was a promise. 1 year later, Oliver provided the capital that launched the company. It was not a gift. It was a contract containing a single hidden clause. Proven betrayal would transfer full control of the business to Isabella. Henry signed, without reading the fine print, already tasting the future he believed he would build alone. This. In the 3rd year of the company, Henry came home long after 10 o'clock. Isabella, 7 months pregnant, waited in the living room with a cold dinner still on the table. The windows open to the warm Austin night. "You said 6. I closed a contract, Isabella. That is what I work for. That is what we both work for. I left law school to hold this household together." He offered no further answer and went to shower, the sound of water running like a wall between them. The next day he brought flowers. She accepted them, yet she stored the earlier words in a quiet place that did not forget easily. 2 years after that, Henry returned from a business trip to Houston carrying a box of chocolates of a brand Isabella had never seen. "Bought them at the airport," he said. She looked at the box, then at him, and asked nothing more. Not because she fully believed, but because the discomfort was still small enough to push beneath the surface of love that still remained. At 5 years, the company secured its largest contract yet, supplying 3 major builders in the capital region. Henry celebrated with the entire staff at a restaurant, gave an emotional speech, received applause that seemed to fill the whole street. Outside in the parking lot, Oliver sat inside his own car and watched without entering. Isabella had telephoned to tell him of the gathering. He sent an unsigned card the following day. "Keep building. I continue to watch." Henry never learned who had sent it. Neither of them imagined that the same stage of triumph would one day become the scene of his public fall. The years that followed brought steady growth. Henry's name became known throughout Austin's construction circles. Isabella raised their newborn son, and later returned to her interrupted studies in law, carrying both exhaustion and a quiet determination. Oliver remained present at every important private date, and absent from every public appearance. No one except Isabella understood how closely he followed events, not even Henry. Peace, however, never lasts forever. In stories built on hidden foundations, the truth almost never arrives at the first suspicion. Brianna Hayes entered the company as a marketing intern at 26, ambitious, and without any initial intention of becoming involved with the owner. Henry was 44, weary of marriage, of routine, of the feeling that Isabella no longer looked at him with the same admiration as before. The feeling was false. Isabella had simply matured and found other sources of fulfillment. To a man accustomed to winning every contest, that quiet distance felt unbearable. The approach began slowly, a compliment after a meeting, a conversation that stretched past office hours, a message late at night that lingered longer than it should have. At first, Brianna did not know he was married. Henry concealed the fact for months. By the time she discovered the truth, she was already entangled, and he had already decided he would not stop. Isabella sensed the change before any solid proof appeared. A man who suddenly changes cologne, who begins locking his phone, who invents weekend meetings, does not need to be confronted in the heat of the moment. She was Oliver Mitchell's daughter, and had learned from childhood never to react while emotions still burned. Gather evidence first. Decide later. One night Henry arrived home smelling of a fragrance that was not his own. He sat and ate in silence. Isabella watched from the doorway, said nothing, and went to the bedroom. She cried quietly so their son would not hear, the kind of tears that leave no mark on the morning face. The next morning she prepared breakfast as always, smiled at Matthew, and behind that calm face, a decision began to harden. That same evening, after the boy had fallen asleep, she made a quiet telephone call to her father. "Father, I think Henry is betraying me." Silence answered her for a long moment. Then came the familiar calm voice. "Are you certain, or is it only a strong suspicion?" "A strong suspicion." "Then do nothing yet. I know men like him. If you react with anger now, you lose the chance to protect what matters. Let me handle it." Isabella trusted him as she always had. She did not yet understand the full reach of what Oliver intended to do. Oliver did not hire a private investigator. He engaged an audit firm that had already provided consulting services to Henry's company for years, so no one inside suspected the true connection. He wanted more than confirmation of the affair. He wanted to know how far the damage extended. What the audit uncovered proved far more serious than simple infidelity. Payments disguised as consulting fees, money diverted for travel, jewelry, and the rent on an apartment registered under third-party names. That apartment was the place where Henry met Brianna. Henry had been siphoning funds from his own company to support a double life, convinced no one would notice. Every cent carried a date, a false justification, a paper trail that could not be erased. Oliver collected everything and stored it carefully. He did not believe in impulsive revenge. He believed in justice constructed with patience. In a discreet meeting, the lead auditor, Fiona Pratt, opened a thick folder of documents in front of him. "Mr. Mitchell, with this material you could file suit this very week." Oliver shook his head. "It is not about acting quickly, Dr. Pratt. It is about ensuring that when the truth appears, there is no gap left for him to defend himself, and no unnecessary exposure for my daughter before the proper hour." "How long do you intend to wait?" He looked out the window at the city lights. "Exactly as long as necessary. Not one day more, not one day less." Fiona noted the instruction, without fully understanding the emotional logic behind such restraint. She did not know of the promise made years earlier to an 8-year-old boy on an afternoon of fishing. Matthew was 8 years old when Oliver took him alone to a quiet stretch of the Colorado River outside Austin. "Why do you never come to the big parties Daddy throws?" the boy asked, swinging his legs over the edge of the wooden pier. Oliver smiled without sadness. "Because I prefer to appear when it truly matters. Not everyone understands that. One day you will. And I promise you this. On the most important day of your life, I will be there, exactly where you need me most." Matthew laughed without fully grasping the words, yet he stored the sentence away like a smooth stone in his pocket. 10 years later that day would arrive, and neither of them on that quiet afternoon could have imagined the weight of the promise Oliver had just spoken. Meanwhile, Henry grew less careful. A mutual acquaintance once greeted him and Brianna together in a restaurant and asked no questions. People had stopped asking. Isabella had already decided inside herself that the marriage was finished, not solely because of the betrayal, but because of the long, sustained lie that had hollowed out every ordinary evening. She spoke with a lawyer, prepared documents in silence, and chose to wait, because Oliver had asked her to. Let the investigation finish before he realizes he is being watched. That way he will have no time to hide anything further. Henry had no idea. He believed he still controlled every detail of his carefully balanced life. 3 months before the graduation, Matthew came home earlier than usual and found his father leaving in a hurry, phone pressed to his ear. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Not now, son. Later." Matthew caught his arm. "I saw a message on your laptop by accident. From someone named Brianna." Henry stopped. Color drained from his face for an instant and returned too quickly, covered by a forced smile. "Work, Matthew. A supplier. Suppliers do not send heart symbols at the end of messages." Silence stretched between them, heavy and sudden. "You are tired from studying. That is messing with your head. After the graduation we will talk calmly. I promise." Matthew released his father's arm, not because he believed the explanation, but because in that moment he still preferred belief to the full truth he already suspected. He went to his room, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time without telling anyone he cried at the thought that the family he knew might already have ceased to exist in the form he remembered. He kept the knowledge to himself. He did not tell his mother. He did not want her to know that he also knew. He did not confront his father again, because the first confrontation had already produced a lie, spoken straight into his face. From that day forward, Matthew watched his father differently. Every gesture, every excuse, every promise of later conversation that never arrived. 3 months remained until the ceremony, and without anyone else's knowledge, the son had already begun his own quiet judgment of the man who had raised him. One afternoon, a few weeks before the graduation, Oliver visited Isabella's house. They sat on the same porch where years earlier he had made the promise to his grandson, the air smelling of warm cedar and distant rain. He remained silent longer than usual. "What is it, father?" Oliver looked at his hands. "What if I am wrong, Isabella?" She had never heard him ask that question about anything. "Wrong how? I have spent months building this with a cold head. The contract, the audit, the chosen day. But what if when the hour comes, the only image Matthew carries for the rest of his life is the sight of his father being destroyed in front of him? What if I am protecting you and wounding him at the same time?" Isabella took her father's hand. It was the first time in a long while that she heard him seek certainty from someone other than himself. "You are not doing this to destroy Henry. You are doing it so that Matthew never has to discover the truth alone." Later, when no one else was near, Oliver nodded slowly. Not because the doubt had vanished, but because for the first time he had shared its weight. That night he almost telephoned Fiona Pratt to postpone everything. He dialed the first digits, and then ended the call before it connected. The decision had been made months earlier. All that remained was the courage to carry it through to the end. Matthew carried his own private pressure through those final months. The last examinations, the thesis, the expectation of speaking as class orator, and beneath all of it, the suspicion he had held alone since the afternoon he confronted his father. He chose not to ask any further questions. He focused on what he could still control: the graduation, the future. He could not imagine that the day itself would become the stage for everything. The bomb was already armed and waiting. Isabella woke before sunrise on the morning of the ceremony, pride for her son mixed with apprehension for what she knew was coming. Oliver had called the previous night. "Are you ready? I do not know if anyone can be ready for this, Father. You are more ready than you realize. Trust me one more time. I always have." Across the city, Brianna also prepared. Yet in the last 2 weeks, something inside her had shifted. 2 weeks earlier, she had found by accident a hotel receipt in the pocket of Henry's jacket, from a date when he claimed to be alone at a convention in another city. "What hotel is this?" she asked, holding the paper. "Last-minute meeting. I forgot I even kept it." Brianna did not press, but she stored the doubt like a small stone in her shoe. 1 week later, she telephoned to confirm the time of an event Henry had mentioned, and the company receptionist told her no such event was scheduled that day. Small things, none of them proof, only a growing sense that his stories never quite closed. She considered not attending the graduation, yet Henry insisted. He said he had already settled matters with the family, that Isabella knew and accepted the new reality. Brianna wanted to believe him, because belief felt easier than admitting she might once again be the one being deceived. She did not know that his wife had been aware from the beginning. She did not know about the diverted money. She did not know that her own name had already appeared in a quiet investigation for months. She put on the light blue dress, without imagining that within hours she would stand at the center of a public revelation that was not truly hers, yet that she had been sensing for weeks. In the staging area, the graduates formed lines and adjusted their gowns. "You are going to crush that speech," said Raphael, giving Matthew a friendly slap on the back. "I hope so. I just want today to stay quiet, no drama." He had no idea how ironic those words would soon sound. In the parking lot, Oliver spoke quietly by telephone with Fiona Pratt. "Is everything ready?" "Everything is prepared, Mr. Mitchell, signed and notarized. You need only give the signal." "Good. Today is the day." He ended the call, drew a deep breath, and looked at the building filling with families. For a moment, he felt the full weight of what he was about to do, not doubt. That had already been faced on the porch with his daughter. Responsibility. Minutes remained. Inside the decorated gymnasium, more than 300 guests took their seats. Matthew sat in the reserved front row, adjusting his gown, nervous, and carrying for 3 months a suspicion that was about to receive both a name and a face. Isabella arrived early and sat beside the empty chair reserved for the family's special guest. Only she knew who would occupy it. Oliver entered. Few recognized him. Dark gray suit, white hair combed back. He took the seat beside his daughter and gave her hand a firm squeeze. "It is time." Isabella nodded. During the institutional speeches, her heart beat faster. She looked at her son standing proudly among his classmates and for an instant doubted. What if it is too soon? What if he is not ready? Oliver, as if reading the thought, whispered, "He is more prepared than you imagine, just as you once were." The ceremony began. No one in the hall knew that in 20 minutes it would stop completely. Near the moment for the presentation of diplomas, the rear doors opened. Henry entered holding Brianna's hand. He believed the gesture would be read as natural confidence, as if he were finally claiming his new life, without fear of judgment. He did not expect the absolute silence that followed. Heads turned. Whispers spread in waves. Matthew felt his stomach turn. He knew his parents had separated. He had known for months that his father was hiding something. Even so, he had never imagined the man would bring the other woman to the single most important day of his son's life. Isabella remained motionless, exactly as someone who has practiced a moment 100 times in private. Oliver crossed his arms and watched Henry approach with confidence, still unaware of the storm moving toward him. The director, Professor Richard Adams, paused at the microphone in the middle of a sentence. He recognized Henry as one of the university's longtime donors. He also recognized Oliver. That changed everything. A quiet benefactor is never ignored. Minutes earlier, Oliver had made a discreet request. If he enters with that woman, give me a few minutes to speak before the diplomas. It will not disrupt the ceremony. In truth, it will make the day unforgettable. The director had agreed without knowing the full size of what was coming. He drew a breath and looked at Henry. Mr. Albright, before we continue to the diplomas, there is a person who needs to speak with you in front of everyone present. Silence swallowed the auditorium. Henry smiled, believing some tribute for his donations was about to begin. Brianna tightened her grip on his hand without understanding, yet with that familiar recent sensation that something did not fit. Oliver rose slowly and walked to the center of the aisle, his steps echoing in the quiet. Henry felt a chill along his spine. He did not recognize the man, yet something in the posture unsettled him. "Who are you?" Oliver stopped a few paces away and looked directly into the eyes of the son-in-law who had never truly known him. "I am the man who financed the company you believe you built alone, and I am the father of the woman you chose to betray and humiliate in public." A single collective murmur rose from the seats. Matthew's eyes widened. He had never seen this older man clearly, yet he began to understand that the distant grandfather had always stood closer than anyone realized. Oliver turned so that every person could hear. 18 years ago I provided capital so you could expand your business, because I trusted my daughter, and she trusted you. Henry tried to interrupt. Oliver raised one hand. In that contract, there was a clause. Proven betrayal returns full control of the company to Isabella. Fresh murmurs spread. Brianna felt her legs weaken. She had never known of any such contract. She had never imagined that her presence here served as the final living proof. You signed without imagining the day would come when it would be used. Oliver continued. Because you never imagined you would be discovered. Henry's face had gone pale. This is a setup. You are humiliating me in front of my son. No, Henry. You placed yourself in this position. I only chose the proper moment. If the clause already secured control, what else had Oliver kept in reserve? The answer arrived with the numbers of the diversion. Whispers grew louder. A woman in the third row asked her husband if he had known Henry had a silent partner. I always thought he built everything alone. So did I, the husband answered. Two professors exchanged glances. One murmured that the sudden large donations now made a different kind of sense. A journalist present to cover the graduation as a social event had already begun typing notes into his phone. No one in the audience yet understood that the worst still waited. Oliver lifted a slim folder. Beyond the betrayal, there is another matter that must be clarified today. Over the past 3 years, financial diversions disguised as consulting fees. The money financed travel, jewelry, and the rent on an apartment used for extramarital meetings. The auditorium held its breath. Brianna brought one hand to her mouth. She had never known the true source of that apartment. She had believed he paid for it from his own pocket. In a single moment, the hotel receipt, the non-existent event, the late-night calls all locked into place. Discovering in front of hundreds of people that she had been part of an embezzlement scheme without her knowledge struck her like a physical blow. "I did not know any of this," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Henry tried to step closer and justify. Brianna took a step backward. For the first time, she saw clearly the man standing beside her, and understood that she had been sensing the truth for weeks. Until that moment, Matthew had remained frozen, absorbing each word as a separate blow, each sentence confirming what he had already suspected since the afternoon 3 months earlier, when he confronted his father alone. When he heard the details of the diverted money, something inside him finally broke. Still wearing his gown, he rose, walked to the center of the aisle, and placed himself between his father and the grandfather he barely knew. "Did you know he would bring her today?" he asked his mother without turning. "I knew he was capable of it," Isabella answered. "Not that he would have the nerve." Matthew closed his fists. "Nerve? No. Lack of shame." He turned to his father. "Is this true, Dad?" Henry hesitated. "Matthew, son. Let me explain later. In private." "No." The firmness of his own voice surprised even him. "You already had that chance 3 months ago." I asked you about Brianna, and you looked me in the face and lied. I want you to explain it now, in front of everyone you brought to witness this day." Huh. A new murmur moved through the seats. No one except Isabella and Oliver had known of that earlier confrontation. Henry stared at his son in genuine shock. "You knew?" "I suspected, and I wanted to be wrong." The silence grew denser still. Henry looked around and understood there was no remaining exit. He lowered his head. "I made mistakes, Matthew, serious ones, but I am still your father. Being a father is not only giving a last name, it is being present for the right reasons. Today you are present only because you were caught." The sentence rang like a verdict. Henry tried to recover. "I know I was wrong, but everything I did was somehow meant to give you and your mother a better life. A better life. You used money stolen from your own company to support a secret existence. That is not love. It is cowardice, dressed as provision." Murmurs of agreement rose from the audience. Professors lowered their eyes. "I only wanted." Henry never finished the sentence, because even he no longer knew what he had wanted after so many years of hiding the answer behind excuses. Isabella rose and walked to her son's side. "I did not come here to destroy you, Henry. I came so that our son would understand once and for all that he was never a mistake or a fraud. He is the result of everything that was still true between us before you chose another path." Henry's eyes filled, not yet with genuine remorse, but with the weight of the humiliation he himself had created. "I never wanted it to reach this point, yet it did, because you chose, again and again, your vanity above the truth." The auditorium watched as though witnessing an emotional trial. Brianna took another step backward and searched Henry's face for any justification. She found only shame. For a second she considered staying, considered saying she had known nothing, that she too was a victim. Then she looked at Isabella and at the silence that asked for no apology, and she understood. Remaining would mean choosing the wrong side once more, the same way she had chosen weeks earlier to believe a hotel receipt that made no sense. "You used me not only to betray your wife, but to finance all of this with money that was never truly yours." Henry tried to move toward her, seeking any alliance in the middle of the collapse. Brianna raised one hand. "I was also deceived, Henry, but I will not continue as an accomplice." She released his hand and walked toward the exit, under the gaze of hundreds of people. A simple gesture heavy with meaning. It was the beginning of her own reconstruction, a reconstruction that had actually started weeks earlier, the first time one of his stories failed to close. Sometimes the truth destroys a lie, yet saves an entire life. Without Brianna, without any support left inside the hall, Henry felt the full weight settle on him. He looked at Oliver, searching for some remaining opening. "What do you want from me now?" Oliver closed the folder without hurry. "I want nothing from you, Henry. I have already secured legally what was necessary. The company passes to Isabella. A portion of the shares will go to Matthew when he reaches adulthood. That is all. No technical language." Henry felt the floor open beneath him. Everything he believed he had built alone had never rested entirely in his hands. "This is an injustice," he whispered. Oliver's voice was almost compassionate. "The only injustice here was your betrayal of the trust of those who supported you most. The rest is consequence." The director returned to the microphone, his voice still unsteady. "I apologize for the interruption, yet I believe we have witnessed something important today, about truth, about consequence, about courage." He looked at Matthew. "You are one of the most dedicated students this institution has known, and today, beyond the diploma, you carry a lesson many adults have still not learned." Applause rose, a mixture of emotion and relief. Matthew returned to his place between his mother and his grandfather. Henry remained standing alone in the aisle. No one prevented him from staying. No one invited him to approach again. As class orator, he still needed to climb the stage. He hesitated, drew a long breath, and ascended. He found his mother's eyes, his grandfather's, and finally his father's, still motionless in the corridor. "I had a speech prepared, but I think life has given me a different one today." He paused. In the last few minutes I have learned more about integrity than in 4 years of university. True strength does not lie in hiding mistakes. It lies in the courage to face them. He looked at Isabella. I learned that there is a kind of love that needs no grand words, only constant presence, even when no one is watching. He looked at Oliver. And that sometimes the people we love protect us in ways we only understand years later. And sometimes they even doubt themselves in order to keep protecting us. Finally, he looked at his father. And I learned that loving someone does not mean accepting everything that person does. Sometimes love means speaking the truth, even when it hurts. I tried to do that with you 3 months ago. You preferred to lie. Today I had no choice. The entire auditorium rose in applause. Henry, alone in the aisle, felt for the first time in a genuine way the full weight of everything he had lost. The news traveled quickly through Austin's business circles. Henry lost control of the company. Without funds for a strong defense, he accepted a settlement that kept him out of prison, yet left him with almost nothing. Brianna rebuilt her career far from the city. In the first days, she barely left her apartment. The shame weighed heavily, even though she knew she had been a victim. Her friend Caroline was the one who helped her stand again. You did not choose to be deceived. You choose now not to continue being deceived. Isabella assumed temporary management of the company, with her father's quiet support. Matthew postponed any plan of entering the family business, traveled, processed everything that had happened, and returned with a clear decision about the kind of man he intended to become. Henry, living in a small apartment, tried several times to write letters to his son. He tore up most of them before finishing the first paragraph, not from lack of words but from fear that the words no longer carried any value. One of those nights he decided to begin therapy, not as an excuse but as a starting point. Months later, Matthew visited his grandfather. They sat on the same porch where the childhood promise had been made. The same porch where weeks before the graduation, Oliver had asked his daughter whether he might be wrong. Why did you choose to reveal everything on that exact day? Oliver smiled while looking toward the horizon. Because I promised I would be present on the most important day of your life. I knew that day would not be only about a diploma. And to be honest, I did doubt whether I was right to do it that way. What made you continue? Your mother. She reminded me that I was not doing it to destroy your father. I was doing it so you would never have to discover the truth alone, with no one beside you. Matthew remained quiet for a time. Thank you, Grandpa, for keeping the promise. Oliver placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. I always keep my promises, especially the quiet ones. In the kitchen nearby, Isabella heard part of the conversation and smiled without interrupting. 1 year later, the company became the Mitchell-Albright Group. Isabella implemented a transparent management style that became a reference in the sector. Matthew accepted a junior position under his grandfather's discreet supervision. Henry attempted several times to approach his son again. Matthew never closed the door completely, yet he never allowed it to open fully either. Because true love does not mean accepting everything. It means respecting one's own truth. And that was the lesson the graduation taught each of them. That justice built with patience always finds the proper moment to stand in the open before everyone. 2 years afterward, Matthew walked the corridors of the Mitchell-Albright Group as a junior manager. He paused outside a conference room and saw through the glass his mother leading a negotiation with international suppliers, carrying a confidence she had barely known she possessed decades earlier. Beside her, Oliver observed from a quiet corner, exactly as he had done his entire life. Matthew smiled, remembering a sentence of his grandfather's. The true strength of a family is not that it never faces storms. It is knowing who remains beside you when the storms arrive. That same evening he received a message from Henry. I am proud of the man you have become, even though I have no right to say so. Matthew read it twice. He did not answer at once. He put the phone away and looked out at the lights of the city that had once witnessed the fall of one man and the quiet rising of another. Perhaps one day he would reply. Perhaps he would find space for a partial, cautious forgiveness, built little by little. That night he chose only to feel gratitude for the mother who never gave up, for the grandfather who kept a promise even while doubting it along the way, and for himself, for having learned so young that the truth, even when it takes its time, always arrives. In the years that followed, when Matthew sometimes sat alone on that same porch after the older generation had grown quieter, he would turn the entire story over in his mind, the way a man turns a smooth stone in his pocket. He came to understand that the deepest lessons are rarely delivered in a single dramatic hour. They are assembled across years of small choices, of silences kept for the right reasons, of patience that refuses to become bitterness. His grandfather had taught him, without ever preaching, that justice delayed is not always justice denied. Sometimes the delay itself is the instrument that protects the innocent and leaves the guilty no room to rewrite the past. His mother had shown him that strength can look like stillness, that refusing to create a public scene at the first wound can be an act of greater courage than any outburst, because it preserves the future of a child who still needs both parents to remain human rather than monsters. Even Brianna, in her quiet departure and later reconstruction, had demonstrated that a person can walk out of someone else's wreckage without carrying the wreckage forever. And Henry, in his eventual willingness to sit with a therapist and face the empty rooms of his own making, had proven that a man may lose almost everything, yet still retain the chance to become slightly better than the worst version of himself. Matthew never claimed the story had a tidy ending. Families rarely do. What he carried forward was the knowledge that love and accountability are not opposites. One can hold both at once. One can refuse to pretend a betrayal never happened, and still leave a narrow door open for whatever honest change might one day walk through it. The older he grew, the more he valued the quiet architecture of integrity his grandfather and mother had practiced. The long gathering of evidence, the refusal to strike while anger still burned, the careful choosing of the hour when the truth would serve more than it destroyed. In a culture that often rewards the loudest reaction, they had chosen the slower, harder path of measured justice. That path had cost them sleep and peace and years of private endurance. Yet, it had also given Matthew a foundation solid enough to build a life upon. When he himself became a father years later, he would remember the fishing afternoon, the promise kept, the auditorium that fell silent, and the simple fact that the people who loved him most had been willing to carry the weight of difficult truth so that he would not have to carry it alone. In the end, that was the inheritance that mattered more than any company or any diploma. The living proof that patience, when joined to courage, can turn even the most public collapse into the quiet beginning of something truer.